Let's try this again. It helps to unmute oneself. So welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for more Dreamers of the Golden Dream with Susan Straight and Douglas McCullough. I am holding up the copy of the book that goes along with an exhibition opening this week at the Riverside Art Museum. My name is Katie Porter, and I am Executive Director of Inlandia Institute, a literary and cultural arts nonprofit based in inland Southern California, the ancestral homelands of the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseno, and Serrano peoples. We respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, the Inlandia region is home to many indigenous peoples from all over the world, and we express our gratitude to them for allowing us the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. And now for a few housekeeping notes. We want you to know that closed captioning will be available and that you access that through the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. Also, please note that this is a view-only presentation and it is being recorded. If you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box or feel free to use the chat. So now a little bit about our guests. Susan Straight was born in Riverside, California, where she lives with her family. Her memoir, In the Country of Women, was a national bestseller. She has published 8 novels, including High Wire Moon and I've Been in Sarah's Kitchen and Licked Out All the Pots, both also national bestsellers. Her lists of awards, recognitions, and other publications is long and illustrious. Her new novel, Mecca, will be published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux in March 2022. She is Distinguished Professor of Creative Writing at UC Riverside, and we are absolutely thrilled to have been able to publish this book, More Dreamers of the Golden Dream, with her. Douglas McCullough is an artist, writer, and senior curator at the California Museum of Photography. His work has been shown nationally and internationally in more than 250 exhibitions. McCullough's most recent books are In the Sunshine of Neglect and Facing Fire, both published by Inlandia, and The Great Picture, Making the World's Largest Photograph. Doug and Susan are frequent collaborators, and they are here today to talk about their most recent project, More Dreamers of the Golden Dream. So welcome, Doug and Susan.
Good to be here.
So nice to be here. Thank you.
Where do we start? Where do we start? Susan and I have not rehearsed anything. Susan, what do you think?
I think, Doug, that for me to be sitting here in this, I've been for 33 years sitting in the same spot, working at the same little desk, and above me is the original fragment of photograph of Alberta and Rosie, and kind of the beginning of this whole project, but of so many other things that we've worked on. So to see the book right below it, it really means a lot. That fragment of photograph, the original, is still here in the office. And as Doug knows so well, it's only this big, and it was torn sometime probably back in the 60s. And my father-in-law, General Sims, put a little piece of cardboard and the photo and put it in a sandwich baggie. And I found it 10 years ago when I was given a bin full of photographs to sort through, and Doug restored it. And that was a lot of the beginning of this project, wasn't it, Doug?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Someone asked me related to the Riverside Art Museum exhibition that opens this Thursday. We can. I think there's something in the chat, a link to that. Somebody over there said, "How did this whole project start with you and Susan?" And I, quickly ran through my memory, and I said, in December 2011, I got a phone call and said that there had been a fire at a house at the corner of 11th and Kansas on the east side, Daisy Carter's house, and that can we go out and shoot photographs? And then that really was the start of this particular project. It's kind of wonderful.
It's so funny that you bring that up, because my brother-in-law Trent Chatham was here the other day, and he was picking up a copy of the book I've had my 3 copies that I gave the first copies to my cousin Terry, who was, a fountain of information for this project, and my ex-husband Dwayne Sims, and then also Trent Chatham, who laughs because he's in so many of the photos. But Trent saw the picture of Daisy Carter's burned house that you had taken, Doug. And what he said to me is, I'll never forget that day, because Trent was one of the first people to see it. And he's who called Dwayne, and Dwayne called me. And you were there the very next morning, and
Right.
it was still smoking, and the charred wood still looked like black satin. And that really was, you're right, that was the beginning of me telling you, this is an iconic house. There was Daisy Carter, her husband, Mr. Carter, and the 4 beautiful sisters, as well as their brother, Butch. And we didn't want that history to be lost. So we started working on these stories.
What I should do is share screen, and we have some of the photos from this story, so as well as the cover of the book. So hopefully I can share the screen and make this work here.
I'm
Now I
excited
have
to
to-
see them.
So now I assume we're seeing the front.
Yeah,
So this is-
the cover looks so great. The quality is so crisp. And my mother-in-law, Alberta Sims, passed away when I was pregnant with my youngest daughter, Rosette, and she just turned 26. So it's been 26 years that Alberta's been gone, and she looks so full of life in this picture, and she looks so gorgeous and like she knows all the secrets everybody's been telling her. And then next to her is her sister Rosie, and Rosie only passed away 2.5 years ago, actually 3 years ago this October. She passed away the fall before COVID, and we were able to have a big service in the church, which is also St. James Tabernacle, which is also plays a big part in this book and in this museum exhibit.
I should just say, for people who don't know about this is probably everyone, that there are 10 stories with images. Some are historic, some are ones I shot, many are from families and so on, that are all interlinked, so they all interlock. And I'll see if I can switch. There's the house that morning.
Yeah, this is to me, such a California photo too, because you also have the intersection of the chain link fence, and then you have the palm frond sort of in between there. But this was this beautiful house that was, as everyone still says, Daisy Carter was the style setter for the East Side, and she had made this house beautiful. And in the book, there's also a photo of the interior of the house that was saved because Daisy was so proud of how beautiful her house looked. And I want to point out that back on the cover, it said that there was a new introduction essay by Delphine Sims. And it feels very strange for the first time to say that my daughter Delphine wrote the introductory piece and much of the text that responds to this. And Delphine couldn't be with us today because she actually has an event at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, which is pretty nice. But she's working on Black vernacular photography. So it was great, Doug, that you brought this up. This notion that so many African-American, Mexican-American families, as well as working class white families and Asian-American families, as well as Indigenous people, have vernacular snapshots, like all those Polaroids that were taken, or maybe like the little fragment that we were talking about earlier. And to preserve those is something that's really important for American history, right? This is a snapshot that's been passed around in our family for 30 years, and it's been reproduced over and over again. And this is from my right, Daisy Carter, her aunt, Annie Tillman, who helped her raise her kids after Daisy's mom was killed. And on the left is Hattie Davis, who was then Hattie Moss, who's still just a beacon of light in Riverside in her 90s, and is Trent Chatham's grandmother. And so this photo means the world to so many people, doesn't it, Doug?
I know, it's just fantastic. I mean, it's my, as a photographer, my favorite photographs are photographs like this, because they're just like soaked in meaning. They're soaked in meaning. And a new photo that I've taken just can't carry this. It's a carrier of history. And it's been, I have to say, super fun working on the exhibition and working on the book with Delphine, because she and I and you, in fact, can geek out over photo history and the meaning of photographs within families and so on. And so a photo like this, you see it on the screen, it's kind of smudged, it's got scratches, it's carrying its own history, or in the case of the one that's on the cover, this one, it's torn, it's creased, and yet it's treasured. It came, as you say, protected in a plastic bag with a cardboard backing. And so it's a fragment, and it's carrying this history with it in its very physical presence, but also in the photo. And so it's just, you can't do any better than that. I tried to make scans that preserved all of the artifacts that came along with it. It's just beautiful.
That's one of the things that's most important about this book and the show, is that I think, especially for young people, so many people since we last exhibited this show told me, I'm going to start listening when my grandma tells me stories, or when my tío tells me a story, or when, my abuelo constantly tries to show me this one like pair of clippers that meant a lot to him. And that's because, actually, coincidentally, someone asked me yesterday for this big project I've been working on, don't you have any photos of yourself as a child reading? No, not a single photo of me exists as a child doing something like that. Like, that just wasn't something that happened in our family. And it didn't happen in a lot of families, Doug, but now, because of the advent of the cell phone, people take pictures of everything, like everything is documented. And to me, when you see a sort of a treasured fragment of a Polaroid that's black and white from, the past, it almost sends shivers down your spine to think about how rare those were.
Actually, now I'll start geeking out on photo stuff, but I worry about it's at the moment, there's a zillion photos on everybody's phone, but that phone doesn't last forever. And so unless somehow and it's in the cloud, but how do you ever get it? So 30 years from now, will those photos be gone? Whereas these fragments are physical objects and can survive. I love this photo. It's so amazing with the decollete, all that.
This photo is the other thing that greets people when they come into my house. And my brother-in-law General brought an old friend, Valerie, the other day. Like, people come to my house all the time, and they see this photo, which has been blown up and is on a piece of cardboard like the one that's behind me. And everyone says, oh my gosh, Aunt Loretta and Alberta. And this is the afternoon before Alberta is getting married. So she has graduated from Riverside Poly High School, which is at the old RCC, in 1952. And she's 18 years old, and she's going to be married the very next day. But in this photo, I love the way she's shyly looking down. And Loretta clearly idolizes her because Alberta was so charismatic. And actually, Alberta is marrying Loretta's older brother, General. So, like, look at the family meeting here. These two giant clans, the Sims clan and the Carter Morris clan, who, there are literally 400 to 500 of us in this, in my married family, that exists in the world because of sort of the meeting of these two families.
It's kind of fantastic, Susan. Talking to you for now almost 10 years about this specific project is I've read probably I think all your novels, and there are some hard things in your novels. There are some really, you don't shy away from toughness, but this whole story is somehow bathed in warmth. It's like you call it the driveway, a love story. So I don't know, it's kind of wonderful because it's very close to your heart, and a photo like this just carries all that.
It does. But yesterday I was driving with my mom, who has memory loss, and we drove to the old Market Basket on the east side because I needed to take her to get things to decorate her door for Halloween. And she remembers the Market Basket and the TG&Y so vividly. And you know what we did yesterday? I told her I was going to be doing this today. We drove down Denton Street. And my mom, who came here in 1955, she worked at Household Finance, and she rented a room. She was 19 years old, and she rented a room by herself on Michigan Avenue, which was then 7th Street. And she remembers Denton Street so vividly. And so we talked about how hard work was for them back in the day. And we talked about Alberta and her sisters going to school at Poly, walking directly home, and then working at the turkey plant at night or cleaning Sage's Market. And just those were the memories that my mom and I talked about yesterday, Doug, was how hard everyone worked. Everyone worked so physically hard. And so isn't that funny that you bring that up? Because of course, Alberta's mom, Daisy, saw her own mother murdered in front of her when she was 5. And yet Daisy devoted her entire life to her 4 daughters. And she wanted to make sure that they all had this beautiful middle-class upbringing. And that happened when she married Aaron Carter and, moved into that house on 11th in Kansas.
Which then people describe as we ascended into the middle class at that point.
General will say it when we see him next week at the museum. He'll say, my mom married, my grandmother married Mr. Carter, and we ascended into the middle class. And it's very true, because Alberta and her sisters continued to work very hard. But Daisy, who had experienced so much violence and hardship in her life, she finally got to sit down on a beautiful couch and rest. And that meant
I don't think I put, in fact, I know I didn't put that particular photo, the interior photo you talked about before.
Well, that'll be for the museum show in the book. People will have to go see it there.
So there's one more photo related to this little segment of the story. This is on the site of Daisy Carter's house after it was torn down after the fire. So this is like 2 years later, actually. And who do we have here? We have Dwayne. Let's see if I get it right. I don't know. You, Susan, you know all these people inside and out. Dwayne, left to right.
I'm going to see everybody tonight, which is funny. So
Dwayne,
this
Eddie
was
Chandler,
about a year and a
General,
half.
Carnell, and Sensei. Yeah.
Right. This is Dwayne, and this is our cousin Eddie Chandler III, and Eddie Chandler's father, Eddie Chandler II, was cousins with Daisy Carter, and his father was lynched at around the same time that Daisy's mother was murdered. So Daisy was then an orphan, and Eddie Chandler II was an orphan, and they both came here from Sunflower County, Mississippi. And so that's Eddie Chandler, who grew up on Ninth Street and still lives on Ninth Street. My brother-in-law General, my brother-in-law Carnell, and my nephew Sensei. That's who's walking across this kind of hallowed ground of Daisy Carter's house. And of course, Sensei didn't know her, but Dwayne and General Carnell and Eddie immediately started telling all these stories of when they were kids and they went to Daisy Carter's house and had tea cakes, or they saw the laundry hanging on the line. And the house itself had been bulldozed. So this was kind of like the last Sacramento walking across the land.
Yeah, I have to say, like last weekend, I went to Zacatecas for breakfast, on the weekend. And just because I now do it every time, I cut across on 11th to go past this exact corner, 11th in Kansas. And it still looks like this. It's an empty lot, and yet to me, it still has that house on it. It still has these people walking on it. You just carry that stuff with you.
We all do the same thing. Everyone in the family drives by almost every day. When I come home from UCR, I always cut down Kansas, and especially if I've had a bad day and I'm feeling a little like teary, I stop at the chain link and I'm like, well, you guys had it so much harder than I did. What am I even complaining about? And I feel like it's kind of like our homage to the memory of all those women.
All right, we'll jump.
This is a big deal because the men that you just showed in the other image are the next generation, and that's my generation. I'm 60 years old. Dwayne is 61, or is he 62? General, Carnell, Eddie, all of us, our generation, this is the Lodestone House, because Alberta married General Sims in just after that other photo you showed. And at first they lived on 11th Street within sight of her mother's house. But then in, I think 1963, they bought this house on Michael Street. And this house on Michael Street is still owned by our family. And this is still the gathering place every Friday night. There are never fewer, than 20 people in this driveway. And you captured it at just this beautiful sort of moment. This is in the winter and the TV is outside. We're probably watching the Lakers game. It's just such an iconic photo because there's no garage. This is the beautiful carport. And this is really because General and Alberta Sims had always welcomed everybody to this driveway. The first time I saw this driveway, I was 16 years old, and it was Labor Day. And I thought I was going to meet Dwayne's family, which was maybe like, 10 people, and there were 150 people in the driveway. So I think that this photo, the light is so beautiful, and this house, the focal point is these bricks that later on in the book, there are some great photos of Tony's Market, and Tony Chavarias built this this fireplace and bricks with General Sims and Jesse Collins.
What's funny is for the exhibition, in the exhibition, there's the biggest giant photo that's 10 feet wide in the exhibition is assembled out of photographs that were taken over years in the driveway. And I remember, Susan, you were asking, can we get some photos of some of those things that went on there? Like, how many do you want? I mean, it's unbelievable. Right. It was like an avalanche of, here's this picnic, here's this Labor Day thing, here's this giant, street fair, and here's just one after another. And it just continues in this spot on Michael Street.
Everyone was there last night, starting at 3:30. Trent was there. And what's funny is this summer, there were a couple times when I went on a Friday and it was 105 and we were still out there in the driveway. I mean, where else would we be? And we all laugh because when people say, oh, how hard can it be in California? Well, Trent had been driving a water buffalo truck all day, for the destruction of the cement plant on the west side, with two other guys that showed up. Everyone else had been working all day too, and yet everyone shows up still in their work clothes and their orange vests and sits in those chairs in the driveway because that's home, and that's what you have to do on a Friday to make yourself back into a human. Yeah, there it is.
So this is like
a
couple months ago.
I haven't seen this photo. Wow.
This is, Susan and I went over to hang out in the driveway, just like 2 months ago, and there's a bunch of the same people all hanging out. In fact, some are still with us behind this group here, and sort of on the spur of the moment, leaving your house, Susan, where you're sitting right now, it was like, oh, I'll just grab this photo and we'll haul it over. And then it started being handed around, and everybody was trying to figure out, like, wait, who's this facing away right here? And then, man, you were fat back in the day, and started harassing each other.
Everybody was talking smack about each other. It was very funny. And this is a hot day. This was really hot. And it's funny because people were wearing shorts, and then the other photo, everyone's wearing jackets. And if it gets cold enough, we'll start, there'll be a fire in like the oil drum. This was a hot day, and gosh, it was so much fun. And if you look, Terry's son David is wearing his Dodgers gear, and it's just really something. Yeah. And then I love that my brother-in-law General is holding the photo, because I can see a vague outline of his cap right here now that I'm looking at
it. Reflected in the glass. I know, and they're basically 8 years apart, so it's kind of amazing. One's in the winter, one's on a really hot summer day. Nothing else really has changed. I will speak for Delphine here, since she's not here, and I will say that one of my favorite things, that I have 3 daughters. Gayla's 32. She just interviewed for a job at the Oakland Museum of California, which is very exciting. Delphine just started working at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and Rosette is working on the TV show called Below Deck and lives in Pasadena. So everyone's doing narrative and history and art, and it's pretty amazing. Delphine said to me one time, I don't even know how long ago it was, Doug, but we were talking, and she said, everything I need to know I learned in the driveway on Michael Street. And it was like that takeoff of that Robert Fulghum book, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten, which was like, take a nap, be polite. Everything that we stand for, we learn in the driveway, which is your family is everything. Loyalty is everything. The people who are in the driveway will save you, would drive 100 miles to save you no matter what. And, that family and loyalty and kinship are like the bedrock, the foundation, and that they were formed in the driveway. And then the last thing is, you got to be a good storyteller in the driveway.
I never tell stories in the driveway. I'm a writer because Trent's the storyteller, or Montrell, or my brother-in-law, General and Derek, are great storytellers. Dwayne and I just are quiet because we're not very good at it.
Okay, well, that's not true at all, but
I
really,
can write them down, but I can't tell them. It's like my brother, this is a great photo because I was texting this morning with Montrell's wife, Cindy. This is Montrell Hamilton, who is Trent's brother-in-law. And next to him is my beloved brother-in-law, Derek Sims, who is going to come Thursday. Derek has a photographic memory. Doug, you've seen this.
yeah.
Any one of us, if we're like, wait, what year did whatever happen? People will like call Derek. What's so-and-so's birthday? Call Derek. Derek knows everything about everything. It's amazing to be with him. And next to Derek is Keith Thomas, another that's Clarice and Jesse Lee Collins' son-in-law, also family. In the middle is Trent, and then there's General, and General is telling me some great story, and clearly I'm listening. And then the person who's laughing is Howard Fields. And I remember this day so vividly. You know, Montrell had just told us a funny story about somebody hiding in the bushes, like thinking they were going to rob him, coming out of like a parts store. And he just looked at them and said, wait, you're going to rob me? That's stupid. And they ran away.
Right. There was a previous iteration in 2013 of More Dreamers of the Golden Dream at Riverside Art Museum. And this version that opens on Thursday has new photographs. This photograph wasn't in it. Obviously the new photographs weren't in it. Susan's written new work for it. And of course, Delphine has new commentary kind of throughout. So it's pretty great. This photo, I love this photo because it somehow, to me, of all the ones in the driveway, I like the night one. I mean, but this captures something of the spirit of what goes on, which is everybody's engaged. It's crazy. There's only one other one that I threw in that I threw in just because I had to, which is there's always food in the driveway.
Yeah.
There's a big, huge barbecue that kind of hulks off the edge of the carport and gets fired up. And then anybody who comes along is like, here, have some hot stop, you want a beer and a hot links or whatever. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely
great.
That's how that's really how you became able to do this, is that I took you to the driveway and you had never been there. And, you went to Poly and we all went to North. But what's very funny is there you were in the driveway and they're like, oh, that's Susie's friend. And so you didn't even have a name, remember, in the beginning?
Yeah.
It was like, where's your tall friend? And so what's funny is that's exactly what happened, is you were offered hot links and you were offered food. And everyone became comfortable with you enough that when we had 2 funerals, you were invited to the funerals as like part of the family, because you had taken these iconic photos of Jesse Wall and other people. And then that leads me to think that, Del Roberts, you have this iconic photo of Del Roberts, and you have another beautiful photograph of Jose Medina at Zacatecas, the night that he became the first elected Latino assemblyman from this area. And both of those men use those iconic photos that you took. Those are touchstones now. All of that happened because you came to the driveway one day.
I know. It's a wonderfully accepting world. And I feel absolutely honored just to be able to go and hang out, and I try and not be a jerk. And I sort of follow your lead, Susan. And I'm not sure I'm the best storyteller among a group of amazing storytellers. So then I kind of lie low on that front, throw in a little bit here and there. I have to say, in your text that's in the show, you have an amendment, which is like, tell good stories, because if you don't tell good stories, no one's going to listen. Is the way you put it, something like that. No one will listen.
Yeah.
It's a whole group of very good storytellers. I couldn't resist this. This is the back of that same set of bricks that we've been seeing from the other side, from the driveway side. So this is inside the house.
Yeah. So when I gave Dwayne his copy of the book last week, we were sitting on the porch talking for a couple hours, And then I gave him his copy of the book, and we started paging through it, and we were really impressed by the crisp quality of the photos. This is the photo that made him tear up. Not any of the other photos until he got to this one, because it doesn't look like this anymore. You know, I mean, this is actually the two club chairs that used to sit on either side of this fireplace. There was a maroon one and a dark green one. They came from Daisy Carter's house to this house on Michael Street. And then we inherited the maroon club chair that had belonged to Dwayne's grandmother. Our kids grew up sitting in that chair and sliding down the leather. It had brass, you know, it was old school brass upholstery. This is, of course, long after General and Alberta have passed away. And so this photo really, you know, it's evocative, but it's sad, right? There, that mirrored area and that light are still in the dining room area, which just is right overlooking that fireplace. So yeah, it made us a little teary. It did.
I love this, but this is another one of these photos where I just absolutely love the whole thing, the construction of it, the slight tilt, the little bit of blur, the scratches that it carries from being carried hand to hand to hand and kind of treasured in a way. And on a, you know, I don't know, if you turned it into the New York Times or the New Yorker or something, they'd be like, what the hell happened to this photo? You know, it's been wrecked. But that's what's wonderful about it. It's so good.
It's so
And look
good.
at Alberta. It's like, oh man.
And like, you can so clearly see the love between them because it's not posed at all.
Yeah.
That's what I love about Polaroids. Like, now think about what we were talking about with all these photos on cell phones. Little kids are doing like poses. They're 3 years old and they know how to pose. But Alberta's hand on General's shoulder and then the other hand on the table, like, it, you know, you can just see how much in love they are. And you can't make that happen. You can't make that happen.
You know, and there's something so honest about a snapshot. I mean, it is so real, the unposed. There's a wonderful quote by a photo critic who said, I would trade every Renaissance painting of the crucifixion for a single snapshot.
It's true.
Which is, you know, that's the power of snapshots. Trade every single photo ever of the crucifixion for a single snapshot. You know, it's really something. Here's another one in the same vein.
Oh, we had like so many. We had several of these. You know, that sort of. Sorry, I was trying to see if there were questions in the chat. We had several photos of these because this was a whole series taken by one of those, you know, a photographer that came and sat. And it's so funny because then this was, I can't remember which of us took this picture, but this is General for once all his kids had shown up. And that was super exciting. And golly, these kids are so grown now and they have kids. And so it's just so funny. There's oh, that's so nice to see.
Time goes by, mortality in photography.
Yeah. And this photo is sort of, again, just what you said. This is a classic. My brother-in-law General's girlfriend, Renee, she took this photo at the funeral of General Sims. And again, it's a beautiful snapshot and it's high quality. And I just loved it. And I gave it to you and you said, this is just amazing. She's such a good photographer. She captured everybody candidly. The light is perfect. Everything that we just talked about is encompassed in this photo. You can see Angie in the background. That's my youngest sister-in-law who still lives in her bedroom. She's 59. No, she just turned 60 because we're the same age. Angie has Down syndrome and she has lived in her bedroom on Michael Street for her entire life, for 60 years. And so that's part of the reason Michael Street exists, is because Angie lives there.
And the bonus here is that Trent is in the photo. So, you know, he's in every photo pretty much.
Trent is in every photo.
All right. Another story. One of the East Side, you know, people in this area know one of the East Side fixtures since 1963 is Zacatecas. So this is from the Medina family This is the original location, which is on the north side of University and a handful of blocks from where it was for a long time at Sedgwick and University. They have this up in their foyer now in a slightly spiffed up version. They gave me files of these and I kind of made nicer digital versions, which are now the ones they have up. So here's a photo of the inside of the original Zacatecas.
Wow.
And so one of the 10 stories kind of revolves around Zacatecas and specifically starts with this story.
Yeah, I think for Riversiders, Zacatecas is like the equivalent of the driveway, but for like the whole city. It's like everybody goes to Zach's. You're going to see people that you know and love. Like there really is no other place like that. And all over America, people talk about, like a diner or a hometown restaurant. Like if you go to a small town in Colorado, or if you go to like Detroit or New York, there'll be the diner where everyone sees each other every day. But Zacatecas was different. It really was, because as has been described to us so often, people went there in the morning, businessmen went there for breakfast, and people who were like contractors and working guys. But like also the food was so good. And so first date, Robert Anderson asks Mariko to go out with him, and they eat a giant burrito with the red sauce. And then he proposes the next day. And him telling us that story about what Zacatecas meant. And the reason Mr. Anderson, I still have to call him Mr. Anderson, there are lots of Andersons, but the reason that Mr. Anderson felt that way is because the Andersons were raised in the house next to the Medinas, Oscar Medina, who owns Zacatecas. And so this is the classic story of Southern California, but especially of our Southern California, which is that Robert Anderson always said we traded biscuits for tacos and we grew up next to each other, and the Medinas and the Andersons their lives were so intertwined that I just think it's a great story.
Yeah, no, which is, I think, part of not part of, you and I actually talked about the fact that all these stories in a way celebrate interconnectedness and diversity and kind of the lack of fractiousness that now we see in division. Instead, everybody kind of lived together and got along. You went to North where it was pretty much even split, Latino, Black, all mixed, white, all mixed up. And it's not like there was some kind of, that was just the way it is, and that's the way it should be. And it was a celebration of this. And this story really captures that for me. I mean, coming in on a date, she had another boyfriend who it turned out was kind of like two-timing her. And then, they had just met, and bring her in for this, Oscar made the burrito, the special burrito with the red sauce. And 2 days later, he proposed, like, yeah, we'll get married. And we went to their house and, sat on the couch with them. They're still married. They
told us this whole story. Yeah, they did. It never gets old. It's a great story.
So here's one of my photos of the second location of Zacatecas, just up the street from the first. And
gosh, this was a great photo. It was so much fun. And that location is gone now because they have moved into the old space occupied by Shakey's, which is where all of us who went to North, that was our gathering place after football games and forever. But it's funny, I love this photo because it means Josefina, Oscar's wife, who had passed away, long ago, she remains alive through the joy in this photo, because these are her descendants who are serving. And it also keeps this restaurant location alive, even though the new restaurant's great, but this location was iconic and nobody will ever forget it. And I love how the background of the kitchen shows too, because that's where all the real work is, I mean,
right.
That's one thing I love, about photos like this is, again, like when people take photos now, they're very careful to erase or curate, as they say, any kind of messiness. But in real life, you take a picture like this, you're working hard. We had them come together for 2 minutes to take this photo.
Max.
And they were it was a huge crowd in the restaurant that day. If you look in the back, you can see probably John Medina working back there,
Yeah. And what I try and do, I mean, this is more photo dweeb talk, but super wide angle lens, 18 millimeters. So it includes all the messiness. I don't want to crop out all the stuff. I want to just include everything. And when they moved into this location, Vicky, who's the second one to the left there, told us, Vicky and John told us that the first one was so small, you were essentially in the kitchen if you sat on the counter.
Yeah.
And this one, they decided, yeah, we should have the kitchen open to the whole restaurant. And the new one has the same, you can look right straight back into the kitchen, so
Might as well.
might as
Yeah,
well. So
I need to say there was a question that I just was able to look at now. Sorry, Anne, that it took me a minute. For me, I have bad eyes, and so to go up and down is hard. But Anne asks us, she said she just came from the Poly North 55th reunion. And she wants to know more about North in those early decades. And that's such a great question, Anne, because I'm actually going tonight at 5 o'clock to the American Legion Hall at Fairmount Park with Trent and Dwayne, and we're going to be going to a 10-year gathering. I'm sorry, 10 years worth of North High years. I think it's from 70 to 80. So one thing I will say is that I love the fact that my mother-in-law and all three of her sisters went to Poly. So growing up, we heard, Poly was the original school. I mean, it was at RCC. My girls loved walking around RCC because we live near there and thinking about their grandmother going there. I have my mother-in-law's high school yearbook from her senior year in 1952. But the truth is, of course, Poly was very much, you had a group of Mexican-American young women that could not be in certain clubs. You had young African-American women that could not be in certain clubs. And so like looking at that 1952 yearbook reminds me of how things were back in the day. And there's no need to not bring that up. And then North was built. And so the first class of North, maybe someone else will have to remember. I don't remember the date. But when we were at North, it was a third Black, a third white, and a third Chicano, as was said when we were in the 70s. No one had just gotten here from Mexico. People were fifth generation. Lots of my family, my in-laws' family, they arrived here in the 1880s or in the 1920s, whereas my mom just got here in 1950s. And my stepdad had just gotten here from Canada after being discharged from the Air Force at March. So I think one thing I wanted to say about North is that we all grew up, everyone fell in love with each other. So I have neighbors like my neighbor, Virgie Saucedo, her husband is white. Her brother Dennis married someone who was African-American. My kids went to Poly and Linda Saucedo worked at the front office. Like to grow up as a North Husky is still so deep. I have two neighbors, Albert and Tony Segovia, and they lived down the block from me. And they were great baseball players. They were ahead of me. But one day, about a month ago, we found out we're cousins by marriage because their mom, Lucy Segovia, was married to Eddie Chandler. That's Eddie Chandler that you saw earlier. That's his mom. So Albert's like, wait, mija, are we cousins? I'm like, I guess we're cousins. And so it's always, to me, that web of loyalty and kin, and that sort of, not that other schools don't have that, but it's so very strong at North. It's so very strong at John W. North that's why people say, I'm a Husky for life. And it really means something. So it was a great question. Thanks.
Well, a follow-up question. So how has, we've never talked about this, how has that shaped you as a writer and your point of view on the world? Obviously, it must have. That's powerful.
I have to say that this is funny. When you were doing the story at the John W. North High School gym,
Yeah.
and you came to the gym and I introduced you to everybody, and you were shooting all these photos. Do you remember, Doug? Then we had to, I don't know if you have any of those photos in the PowerPoint for today.
I don't, but they're in the exhibition. Come out
That's
Thursday.
fine. And so there's this photo that I found for you from my high school yearbook. And it's this sea of people watching basketball. And Dwayne is on the basketball team.
Right.
And we are it's already my boyfriend. And there's a tiny white woman in this like sea of people sitting all by herself, just like totally engrossed in the game. And that's my mom. My mom loves sports, and she went to Dwayne's games. She didn't come to my tennis matches. She went to Dwayne's basketball games because she said they were exciting. So I'm going to be honest with you. And the other day, I took my mom to get a pedicure. And the three women who were working in the salon were all had been born in Vietnam. Two had moved to Australia and then here, and one had lived here for a long time. And I've known them forever because I had chickens and they had chickens, and they lived right off Arlington, and we used to talk. And they were fascinated to talk to my mom because my mom said, wasn't it so hard to come here? It was so hard for me because I was learning to speak English and everyone looked down on me. And they immediately had this bond. And for an hour, that's all they talked about, is what it meant to be a woman, a small woman, struggling to work so hard in America. And so I'm going to say this, it might sound crazy. My mom she accepted everybody. As long as you had a job, my mom was fine with you. General in Alberta, as long as you had a job. General and my mom were basically the same person, except for one was tall and had hands the size of skillets, and my mom is 4'11". And to think about it, what my neighborhood meant was that there was like one of the first Black opera singers in America, like lived on my corner. And, you know, everybody was military. So in the military, back to Robert and Rico Anderson, everyone fell in love with each other because of March Air Force Base or Norton or George. And that's how we were all raised. To be in that way growing up at North is something that the rest of America sort of, I wish would be replicated now, because you're right. When we all get together, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're North Side, West Side Rubidoux, whether you're from the East Side, like everybody met each other or married each other. Everyone still knows each other. And our kids all, you know, our kids all know each other. So I don't think people understand that Southern California can operate that like that.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
a small town. This is a big place. And yet we are so intricately connected that I would say that we should be as celebrated as any small town in America.
That's fantastic. And for me, the driveway is like the distilled sort of bouillon cube version of that. Like everybody who walks down the street, hey, do you want a hot link? Or the, you know, the woman who is delivering the mail, hey, you know, here, we got food. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like that. And if I show up, it's the only way I'm going to get harassed, which is I'm, you know, Susan's, you know, random person who showed up one day. But I, you know, at this point, it's like, where you been? Why don't you come over more often? That's how I get harassed.
I think the hardships, what we started with in this conversation was the hardships of the generations that came before us. For people like me, and for all those of us in the driveway, as well as everybody in this photo at Zacatecas, you never forget the hardships that your parents faced. And like Oscar and Josie Medina, Oscar Medina is in another photo later in this exhibit, Doug. He is standing at the Irving School, and my mother-in-law Alberta's there, Susan Strickland's there. Sue Strickland is an icon of Riverside. You know, she has preserved so much history. And Doriela Anderson, who's passed away now, Jesse Wall, these are all people who maintained Riverside history. And Oscar Medina is in that same photo. So just to think about the hard work they went through, maybe it's that people like us who like revere family, we never forget how hard it was for them. Oh, look, you have this photo. So when I've gone twice or three times to give testimony at the Capitol, state Capitol in Sacramento, for different things like about the arts. And it's funny because Jose always has me come see that this photo is up in his office. It's this huge deal, and it's in color and everyone loves it.
Yeah, this is one of these moments where, you know, it's in the ballroom next to the old Zacatecas. They have a big space like this in their new restaurant, their new spacious light-filled restaurant. And this was a moment where he, you know, he won. This is the election night when he was first elected. And it was so amazing because, you know, the returns are coming in and it's becoming obvious. And I'm at this point standing on this low stage with my strobe, kind of doing this crazy, like, this is a wild event. I'll try and shoot a really wild photo of it. There's a whole set of these actually. with a
Well,
drag shutter and all this sort of
right.
chaos going on.
And I want to say that one thing that was quite amazing about this night was that I was sitting with some women who were, they were pioneer Mexican American, you know, activists. And they had all come up together at the Settlement House, which is still on Martin Luther King Boulevard. And, you know, schools were segregated back in the day. They grew up in the 30s and talked about how hard it was to be Mexican American, not Mexican born, but second and third generation Mexican American Riversiders, and not have the same opportunities. And they had been fighting for civil rights for decades as well. I sat at a table with them and they talked about like how it was sending their kids off to school. And so yeah, it was really interesting to see this cross section. If you look at this photo, you have like people who, I have a friend in this photo who's from Puerto Rico, and Jose Medina is not Riverside born. When you think about it, all of these people came together at Zacatecas, you know, and just that really. Then there was a young mariachi band that night. Like they weren't older mariachis; they were like new school, like you know, Calaveras mariachis, and it was really nice to see all these people together. I like it.
And when I look at this photo, I think of what Jose Medina as an assemblyman for this district has meant. From my point of view, an art person who's involved obviously with UCR, but also with Riverside Art Museum, and now with the Cheech, that if there are local people listening in, Jose Medina has been instrumental in getting state funding to assist this big fundraising effort to make the Cheech happen in the downtown Central Library in Riverside. And so if he wasn't in place, I think that component would have just not happened. So I kind of look at this night as like, this night needed to happen, not just for itself, but for these future things like the Cheech.
But let's not forget what Jose Medina's day job had been for all those years before. He was a teacher at Poly.
Right.
You know, he was a teacher at Poly, and so he knew Del Roberts and just all the same people that have lifted up our place for all these years.
We have one last photo, which we had to do, which is the new Zacatecas.
Nice.
This is like, yeah, last month. And it's always packed. I'm telling you, they're doing, it's a bigger place and they're doing more business than ever, as far as I can see, you know. So.
I love that the movement in the photo, and I love that there's still the red sauce on the tables. And I do love, you know, that Vicky and John have sort of kept this going, because when people talk about restaurants, it's truly hard physical work and a labor of love. And it's also a leap of faith that people are going to, you know, come to that new place from that other beloved place. So this is a thrill to see. I'm super excited. I hope they get to come on Thursday. I'm looking forward to seeing them.
So I don't know if there are questions, or I'll stop sharing.
I checked on the one question from Anne, which was good. Are there other
I'm having
questions in the chat? There is a comment from Vince and Kate Moses saying that they enjoyed this, and this is a great thing to bring up. There's also a link in case you'd like to buy the book. I would have to say, showing you the book that's behind me, it's pretty amazing the quality of these images that Doug's been showing. They're crisp, they're beautiful. We hope to see you at the opening for the museum, but the book itself it's beautiful. I mean, I know tonight everybody's excited to see it, and like I said, it brought tears to Dwayne's and Trent's eyes, so I'm pretty excited about that. There's a link in the chat for where to buy the book. You can also check out Inlandia itself for how to buy the book. And I will be honest, Doug and I made sure we were really, we were actually really insistent on this. We are happy that the book is pretty affordable, because
$24. So
yeah, the book is for Riverside. The book is for our families and for, you know, our community and everyone else. So yeah, I mean, we hope you enjoy it.
And I see Ann Cantor in the Q&A. It's great to hear that North Community continues to interconnect and thrive. I was only there for the first year as a senior, 65, 66, but we all knew that something unusual was being created. So the Riverside Art Museum opening is this Thursday, the 7th, and it's from 6 to 9. And come on out. It's quite a show.
Yeah, and it's important to point out that today we're talking about this great book launch. The show itself is impressive because of, as Doug said, the images in here, the panels are huge. And the last thing I wanted to finish with, which is funny, it's not a plug for Delphine, it's just something that stayed in my mind. What Delphine said is that when you think about it, she's a young Black woman working with vernacular photography of African Americans and thinking about the way we look at the world. Ram decided to put this show up again for us to be thinking, as you said, about these deep-seated divisions in America right now. One thing that Delphine said to me when we were looking through the images for the show, because she was here at home for a good portion of last year, and to see women like Sue Strickland or Alberta, and to see the women of Zacatecas, and to see Robert Enrico Anderson in a 6-foot panel is a way of, when you think about it, honoring the idea of who these people were and still are in our community. To have a picture of Del Roberts in his hat on Park Avenue, and Park Avenue was once, the bustling center of Mexican American and African American life. All the businesses on Park Avenue, barbershops and restaurants and churches, a lot of those are coming back now, but they were gone for a long time. So I love the idea, Doug, that people are going to get to see the images in really big form. So that's going to be nice.
I know Delphine has a beautiful essay that closes the book, as well as one at the beginning. And the point she makes, which you're sort of summarizing there, is that in the past, and not that distant a past, photographs of these women just wouldn't be in the museum. And so to have a photo of them at 5 foot square or 7 feet wide is a statement. And I think it seems like an important statement. So
I think it's important too. And I look forward to seeing everybody. And it's just as important to have this in a book form this time, that where everyone can look at it at their leisure, and to look at, all these pictures of these iconic places, some of the ones we didn't get to talk about today, like Irving School and the boxing gym that continues, all these things. So yeah, this has been fun. I'm glad we got to do it.
All right. Buy the book. All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hey, so thank you so much, Susan and Doug. We are, again, really thrilled to be able to offer this book to our community. I'll just say, if anybody wants to make a purchase for through our Square site, then just drop me a note and we will have them ready for you to pick up at the opening on Thursday. And do go to the website. It is 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Riverside Art Museum, but they do have some protocols in place. So just be sure to familiarize yourself, and we will hopefully see everybody there. So thank you again for all of you, and we will see you again here sometime soon, and see you Thursday. Okay. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye.
Bye.